All right. Well, welcome to Right Voices. My name is Drew Bond, and I'm the president and CEO of C3 Solutions. C3 Solutions is an educational organization dedicated to accelerating energy innovation and promoting principles related to economic freedom around the important policy areas of climate change, energy, and the environment. And this is a Right Voices interview series where we have the opportunity to speak with some of the most influential public policy leaders from around the world. Today, we have just an incredible opportunity to speak with one of the policy leaders in Texas who's got experience both in the public and the private sector, Jimmy Glotfelty. Jimmy is a public utility commissioner in Texas. He's a friend of mine, and so Jimmy, want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to have a conversation with us. I know you've got a lot on your plate, and so we just kind of want to get right into it. So, how are you today?
I'm great, Drew. I'm so glad I could be here with you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, so Jimmy, tell us a little bit about yourself. You've got an incredible background, and I could probably spend all half hour talking about your various experiences, but how did you get to become a public utility commissioner?
Well, I think the easy way is to say I didn't have a job when I called the governor's office and said I'd be happy to help. I've been blessed with background with jobs that have given me a great background for this. Like you said, in and out of the private sector, in the state government, in the federal government, and most all with the electric power background and electric power markets, transmission expansion, generation development in my background. So with what Texas was facing, my background seemed to work for the governor, and he thought it would be good for an appointment. And I'm honored that he thought my background was good enough. And now we're off and running.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's just been incredible to watch your career, and I think Texas should be really grateful to have you in that position at this time. For those that aren't as familiar with the Texas regulatory landscape, you guys have, it's many things unique about Texas. One thing is you've got a public utility commission and a railroad commission, both of which have to do with energy. So help us understand how those are different.
Say pretty simple. The Railroad Commission, which obviously by its name was originally the regulator for railroads in the state, but they are now the regulatory body for natural gas, for intrastate natural gas and drilling permits. The Public Utility Commission, very simply, is responsible for generation, transmission, distribution, and customer interactions in the electric power system, as well as water and telecommunications. But on the energy side, we do the electricity component, they do the fuel component.
Gotcha. Well, so that helps just come from a 30,000-foot level. And I know one of the reasons we wanted to talk with you, particularly around this time of year, is as you know, last February, a year ago, Texans felt just a real kind of tragedy across the state, right, of what happened with Winter Storm Yuri. And I mean, sadly, 100 people lost their lives, 5,000 or 5 million people were out of power for, a number of days. And I know you were not at the Public Utility Commission at that time. In fact, that probably opened a door for you to get appointed. But you are a Texan. You were, I think, probably in Texas at the time. So I'm just curious from a personal perspective, how did that Winter Storm Yuri and the grid shutting down impact you personally, and how did it sounds like it may have even motivated you to pursue this position at the Public Utility Commission?
Well, I was without power and water for 4 days. So it was cold. I can guarantee that. I think my area was, we struggled like other areas, some more than us, some less than us, but being without power for 4 days. I think there was one time in my life when I was without power for 5 days, and that was when I lived in Virginia and worked in the Bush administration after Hurricane Isabel hit the Virginia coast. That was mostly a vegetation management, a trees issue. This outage was obviously very different, but it was sad to see this state struggle through this outage a year ago when we knew that we had resources that could work, when I don't want to say the perfect storm, but it was pretty close to it. And I think we found, you know, as with lots of big disasters, there are a lot of small things that had to line up for this big disaster to happen. And that's exactly, I think, the way I would suggest it happened in Texas.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know I have a number of relatives in Texas. Actually, was born there, and so it just, it was hard to watch for a number of reasons, and so we're glad you are where you are now to help prevent that from happening again. I know that when it happened or immediately in the aftermath, there was a lot of finger pointing, and I continue to hear some of the chatter in terms of those that love their fossil fuels but hate the renewables, or saying that it's the renewables fault, and vice versa. And it seemed like regardless of it's solar or wind or oil or gas or even nuclear for that matter, pipelines, like everybody was kind of pointing fingers at everybody. And and it strikes me, I mean, one of the things, I did a little bit of research on this, and the University of Texas conducted a pretty in-depth study. You could probably write the study yourself, as I'm sure you probably already have read it. And one of the things they concluded was, and I'll quote, "The failure of electricity and natural gas systems serving Texas before and during Winter Storm Yuri in February of 2021 had no single cause." And then the report goes on to say all types of generation technologies failed. Furthermore, that forecasting, both weather forecasting and energy demand forecasting, failed. So, I mean, it sounds like, as you said, it really was kind of a perfect storm. And, do you agree with that report, and anything in there that you would disagree with? And if that's true, then how do you, as a Public Utility Commission, do your job so that it never happens again?
Right. Well, so I appreciate that report, and I like that report. The thing that I like most about it is the authors chose not to create recommendations. They said, we just want to create the landscape. We want to show what happened. It's up to other people to try to come to solutions to fix it and make sure it doesn't happen again. So they came with an unbiased view. They got to look at data and just show what happened. I think it's a very good report. I think we have seen that lots of resources failed of all different kinds, and that communication was key. The lack of communication was key between the gas and the electric sector. And I think through the work of the Railroad Commission, they're beginning their process. We've done a lot with the electric side of things. I think and I say we, and I don't mean just the Railroad Commission and the Public Utility Commission. I mean the industries, the gas industry and the electric power industry have done a tremendous amount of work together to improve communications, to open lines of discussions about additional storage or additional pipeline reservoirs or other areas where they can get gas, to ensure that we're not dependent just upon one region of the state for gas, so that our interdependencies go down a little bit, but we can get South Texas gas, East Texas gas, as well as West Texas gas to help fuel our system. And that creates less dependency on one region. So I think we're learning a lot about that. We hope it won't happen again. It's an electromechanical system. We saw this past week that we had unique outages associated with ice and vegetation. Those are pretty common. We hope to minimize them, but the big failures like we had a year ago, it's our hope that we've taken big steps to stop that from happening again.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Texas electricity market, because I mean it's really been a beacon of competition in terms of, from what I understand, and I don't know how you guys talk about it in Texas, but you've got kind of an energy demand, or an energy only market, which is more market driven, very subject to market signals and real time energy needs. And then you've got a capacity market, which is more like California's. Which, as I understand it, the government's more involved than in kind of forecasting demand and mandating that public utilities have that demand in reserve. And so is that a kind of a right characterization of the market, and help us understand kind of those competitive influences within Texas?
Yeah, so we do not have a capacity market. A capacity market is where a centralized entity will procure enough energy or enough facilities to produce energy to ensure that we have enough power on any given peak day. We have allowed the market to do that. In other words, market signals for high prices drive the signal to allow generators to come in and deploy capital and build more. So the higher the prices, the better the signal that additional resources are needed. And it's the difference between centrally procured and allowing the market to do it. I wouldn't say that either of them are perfect. Each have their own challenges. Ours has been pretty darn good for the last 25 years. We'll have to see if it continues to be the right structure as we go forward with more renewables, with more tax credits associated with renewables, and with more with less dispatchables coming onto our system. We'll have to see how that structure fits. And it's our hope that we can continue to keep an energy-only market, and that will continue to be the lowest price, most competitive environment for generation in this state.
Yeah, I mean, it just strikes me that I know that there's a number of voices even within the Texas legislature that are pushing for kind of a push more towards a capacity market like what California has, and as a consumer, I think most people probably think, well, look, shouldn't we have backup in reserve, right? That makes sense on a kind of the face of it. I know it's a lot more complicated than that, though, because as you mentioned, when you've got a central kind of planning approach to determining how much resources you should have in reserve, inevitably you're going to be wrong, I would assume, and so there's going to be finger pointing in either case.
So the way that I think about capacity markets are, if you have a car and it breaks down and you have another car that's waiting, you happen to have a second vehicle, you have the capacity built in that you can drive that second car. It may be economic, or you could go rent a car for that time. But if your car broke down and you had a second car and the second car broke down and you had a third car waiting, it seems pretty exorbitant to have three cars sitting there. One of them would very, very unlikely be driven anytime during the year. The second one, maybe just a few hours. It doesn't seem like your economics are going in the right place. So you would have your first car, you might rent for the second car, you might, so you're buying insurance policies. How deep you buy insurance policies is dependent upon how much you think you need a capacity market. The more centralized capacity market that you have, the more you procure, the more levels of insurance you're getting, the more expensive it is.
Gotcha. Now that actually makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that analogy. And so, the other thing that's unique about Texas, and Texas likes to talk about this, is that, you've got your own grid, right? And every other state, as far as I know, they share their grids with other states and regions. And, some in the aftermath of what happened last February would say that, well, that's part of the problem. Maybe Texas shouldn't have its own grid. Maybe Texas should have, greater interconnectivity to the other grids. Help us understand that kind of analysis.
Well, we don't have AC interconnections. We do have DC interconnections to Mexico, SPP, and MISO. So we do have about 800 megawatts. What was unique about Winter Storm Yuri was, since it came down from the north and it included Louisiana on the east of us, we couldn't draw power from those other markets because they were experiencing the same problems that we were. Additional interconnections can be tremendously valuable to the Western market as well as to markets far away. We have proposals here in the state that the commission is trying to resolve. We have a project called Southern Cross that is a DC transmission line that would go from Texas to Mississippi. We're trying to solve that regulatory problem to allow that project to see if they can raise private capital and build that project. It would be a 2,000 megawatt interconnection that definitely could help our system in times of emergencies and needs. We need to go through a more holistic process to determine how much we need to build in our state and how much we want to bring into our state or ship out of our state. We're going through that process now. Interconnections are good. We and everybody in Texas is pretty certain that they don't want to be jurisdictional to FERC. So our interconnections are going to have to be a little different. They're going to have to be direct current, where the jurisdiction is not FERC driven, but it's all under the purview of the Public Utility Commission.
Gotcha. So in other words, you want to maintain your kind of state sovereignty and not be subject to the federal requirements of FERC. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So what about innovation? I mean, you've talked about vegetation management, which I would love to hear your thoughts on that too. And it sounds like there's kind of two sides of the coin. And on the one hand, you've got kind of the forward-looking innovation where there's new technologies that are coming on every day, making the grid more and more resilient. Also, sometimes having additional challenges with them in terms of keeping the grid resilient, and that's just kind of part of the challenge with innovation, right? Is making sure that you balance those kind of cost benefits. So talk about where you see the innovation going, what role that plays, and then bring it down home to kind of the the vegetation management, which is kind of like a very sort of rudimentary natural thing to do, probably low cost, not very exciting, but I bet has a big impact.
I think you're right, Drew. So technology is deployed throughout our system. I mean, our market, as in other markets around the world, and power markets, that is, are driven by IT systems. They are major markets. They're major IT components that every market participant plays a role in. When you get to other technologies, these are new technologies that are put on the power system to allow additional energy to flow across a line, or different conductors that allow more power to flow across lines. Storage, obviously, is a new technology. Virtual power plants, how we integrate electric vehicles. All of these are issues that we don't have the answers to yet, but we're working towards. We need to make sure that those technologies have a role if they're going to be on the system and can contribute valuable resources to the system, that they're part of the system and get paid for that. As it applies to vegetation management, it's my experience that using satellite data, LiDAR data, using computers and predictive analysis, we can come to better uses of resources, go specifically look at areas of the transmission system and distribution system that need to have vegetation cut, rather than on 4-year cycles or 5-year cycles when they become a problem or before they become a problem. So using the technologies that have been used in other industries and apply them very specifically on our system here can yield lots of value in terms of a more reliable system.
Yeah. One of the things, maybe the last thing I want to talk about, and happy to, anything else you want to throw on the table, but energy poverty is something that has increasingly become kind of an important topic. And as a Public Utility Commission, I think probably one of your charges is making sure that energy is not only reliable but also affordable. And the affordability factor is the factor that impacts poor people the most. And so when I say energy poverty, I mean people that are most impacted by energy prices from their pocketbook, and then I mean, we in the United States probably don't think a lot about energy poverty because we're pretty prosperous compared to a lot of places in the world. But I'm just wondering, we even have as our mutual friend Becky Klein has founded a Texas Energy Policy Institute, which is a free market approach to how you address these issues. But from a Public Utility Commission hat on, how do you guys think about these issues? I think that would be important for people to understand.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Everything that we do in this system gets paid for by a consumer. We can never forget that. So we make policy decisions here that cost money. That is not absorbed by the companies. That is passed through to consumers. So we have to have a better understanding of what the consumer is able to pay and willing to pay for this commodity of electricity. It's not a commodity that they can do without. I think we know in this day and age that our lives are pretty much consumed by electricity usage. So having diverse resources allows that to happen. Allowing customers to have different types of resources at their premises and perhaps being able to sell back to the grid at a certain price, that is something that I think we hope will happen, and that pricing will continue to come down. Texas has been blessed. Without this capacity market, we've been blessed with very low cost energy. Now, sometimes we have higher bills because we use more electricity during the summertime, but our electricity per kilowatt is a very low cost compared to other states around the country and other regions around the world. We need to do a better job of making sure that we discuss energy poverty, but we do know very specifically that every dime we spend gets paid for by a consumer in the state of Texas.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate that so much. I'm sure the folks in Texas do. I recognize that, you're trying to approach this from a really practical, balanced approach, and you've got a lot of balancing act to do. But anything we didn't touch on that you'd love to talk about?
Well, I think the one other thing is, we are learning from a lot of folks out there. We are learning from the companies that participate in our markets. We're learning from other markets around the U.S. and around the world as they face some of the same issues. And we're learning from our national labs, which do great work. And we're hoping to allow them to do some more work here, helping us understand different scenarios and things. And I'm leading up a project to try to make that happen. I hope we're successful in that. But we got a little ways to go. And but we're excited that we could create some new understanding of the dynamics of our power system going forward.
Yeah, that sounds pretty exciting. We could probably do a whole nother segment on the national labs and that project. Yeah, that's just an incredible area of innovation.
Well, as you know from your DOE days, they are, I think people call them the crown jewel here in America. They are that and more. The technical expertise is fabulous, and we hope to allow them to work more with us.
Well, that's a perfect way to end. Is back to innovation and
back to innovation.
Back to innovation. So, well, Jimmy, thanks so much for again taking time out of your busy schedule. It's been really good to see you. So, thank you.
Drew, I'm glad we did this. I'm sorry it took so long to get it on the schedule, but I'm very happy we got it done. It's great to see you and great to be with you.
Yeah, not a problem at all. We understand. So, and for our listeners and viewers out there, again, this has been a Right Voices series. This is Jimmy Glotfelty, who's a public utility commissioner in Texas. Got some big things on his plate. And so I hope you'll share this interview with all your friends. Go to our news magazine at c3newsmag.com. And there, again, you'll find just a wealth of information, news, commentary, and interviews like this one. So with that, we'll see you next time. And until then, God bless. Thanks.
Thank you, Drew.